Hello, welcome once again to the Constitution Study. My name is Paul Engel, and we are here to return the Constitution to its rightful owners, we the people. If you are new to the show, thank you for joining. I hope you'll thank whoever pointed you this way. We are here, as I said, we're trying to take control of the Constitution so that it's back in the hands of the people who supposedly run this country. If you're returning visitor, thank you very much. I'm hoping you're enjoying the conversations we're having. I hope all of you will head over to the website, constitutionstudy.com. There you'll find the page for the podcast with any notes and articles on it. You'll also find other articles I'm writing. I hope you'll click the Ask a Question button on the top. I'm very eager to have people ask questions. Questions are how I know, am I getting my points across? Am I explaining myself well? But it's also how I learn what's on people's minds and what ideas should I be following up. So head over to the website, check out some of the articles, click the Ask a Question, and ask me a question. And if it's really good, I'll put it on not only on the website, I'll put it on the podcast. And who knows, I may even invite you to join me on the podcast to discuss it. Other things are going on. I'm trying to put together some speaking engagements. So if you are right now, I live in the Middle Tennessee area. So I'm trying to find opportunities that are not too far from home. This is just getting started. I don't have a lot of capital. I don't have a lot of money set aside to do travel at this point. But if you're interested, please contact me. I would love to talk about the Constitution to your organization or your group. Over at the website, you can join the mailing list. You can get my current essay, How the 16th and 17th Amendments Destroyed the Republic. It sounds a little provocative, and I guess it is, but it tells you how what's been happening in our government for the last 100 years really has changed the nature of our republic. You can also support me on Patreon. Again, I'm looking for support so I can continue. I want to do this more. Right now, I'm releasing podcasts once a week. I'm releasing articles about once a week or twice a week if the news warrants. I'd like to be able to do more, but it's going to take some more effort to do that. So I hope you'll find it worth spending a little bit of time and actually supporting me on Patreon. You can also check out the Constitution Study page on Facebook, facebook.com/Constitution Study. And again, I'm looking for people to participate. I hope you will. I hope you find this educational. I hope it gets your juices going to want to do more and to help rein in an out-of-control government. So today, I'm taking a break again from the recent Supreme Court opinions. I want to talk about something that's come to my attention relatively frequently the last couple of months, and that is the question of who's in charge, or as I titled this, which came first? This is not a discussion of chicken or the egg, right? The really question is, which government came first? Who is in charge of whom? See, if you go to almost any classroom today, you'll be taught that the federal government is supreme. It has authority over the states, county, and local governments. This is sometimes referred to as federal supremacy, and there are some people who really don't like that term. But it really comes from a misunderstanding of the structure of sovereignty in this nation and a horrendous misunderstanding, a misreading of the Supremacy Clause, which we find in Article 6, Paragraph 2. So we have to go back to the beginning, right? Back in 1776, 13 colonies in America, and they declared independence from Great Britain. They actually did it when they passed what's called the Lee Resolution on July 2nd, 1776. Wait a second, you're thinking, what happened to July 4th? Well, part of the Lee Resolution, which was passed by the Second Continental Congress, approved a Declaration of Independence, which was adopted on July 4th. That's what we celebrate on Independence Day. These two documents together specify that the 13 British colonies are and ought to be free and independent states, with all the powers and all the authorities of any other state, like Great Britain, France, or Spain. That means there were 13 independent countries on the American continent starting in July of 1776. Now, some of you may be thinking that the Constitution was actually put in place on September 17th, 1787, right? September 17th, Constitution Day, a holiday, well, a marked day that is rarely celebrated in this country, unfortunately. But while that date is the date that the Constitution was signed at the Constitutional Convention, it didn't actually become binding until it was ratified by the 9th state, New Hampshire, on June 21st, 1788. And in fact, the final state didn't ratify the Constitution until May 29th, 1790. That's when Rhode Island ratified the Constitution. So for almost 12 full years, from 1776 to 1788, the United States of America existed without a federal government. In fact, it wasn't until March 4th, 1789, that the first congressional session started, and President Washington wasn't inaugurated until April 30th of that year. So what is this document that actually created the federal government? That's what the Constitution did. It created the federal government. Now, there are many who argue about whether the Constitution is a compact or not. What is a compact? Well, a compact is basically a contract. Specifically, it's used most often, it's applied to contracts between nations and states, similar to treaties and confederacies. So the Constitution is actually a contract between the states, a national contract that created the federal government. Now, there are those who say they cannot find any language in the Constitution that shows it to be a compact. They claim that since the preamble of the Constitution starts with "we the people," it is an agreement amongst the people of the United States, not the states themselves. Apparently, they didn't read to the end of the Constitution. The end of the Constitution before the amendment says, "Done in convention by the unanimous consent of the states present the 17th day of September in the year of our Lord 1787. It was the representatives of the states, selected by the people's representatives in those states, who agreed to the Constitution. In fact, even James Madison, often called the father of the Constitution, described our government as being established by a compact between the states. In a letter to Spencer Rowan in Montpelier, Madison wrote, "Our governmental system is established by a compact, not between the government of the United States and the state governments, but between the states as sovereign communities, stipulating with each other a surrender of certain portions of their respective authorities to be exercised by a common government, and a reservation for their own exercise of all their other authorities." Why is this important? If the federal government is a product of a compact between sovereign states, then that government is subordinate to the agreement that created it and to the parties of that agreement. Now, many of you may be thinking, well, wait a second, what about the Supremacy Clause? See, Article 6, Paragraph 2 of the Constitution reads, "This Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land." Now, some of you who hear this may be saying, yeah, see, the Constitution and the laws of the United States are supreme. But that is not what the Supremacy Clause says. It says the Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof are the supreme law of the land. Only laws which conform to the powers delegated to the federal government are the supreme laws of the land. The Constitution is supreme. It created the federal government. Laws the federal government makes as it enacts its power delegated to it by the states are also supreme. Treaties that the federal government makes that are pursuant to the Constitution, in other words, are within the powers delegated to it by the Constitution, are supreme. But any law passed by Congress and signed by the President in violation of the Constitution is by definition illegal and therefore null and void. Don't believe me? Well, what did Thomas Jefferson say? And whensoever the general government assumes undelegated powers, its acts are unauthorized, void, and of no force. These are from the Thomas Jefferson papers between January 1798 and 1799. See, even Jefferson said the federal government can only do what it is authorized to do, and everything else, not as simply unconstitutional, it is void. It is of no force. So in this question of which came first, the federal government or the states, it's quite obvious that the states came first. After 12 years under the failed Articles of Confederation, these states decided to create a new compact between them. This compact would create a central government, which we now refer to as the federal government, and delegate to them a list of enumerated powers, reserving the rest to themselves. The 10th Amendment of the Constitution reads, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people." See, as parties to this compact, the states have some very important responsibilities. They created the federal government. They are therefore its masters. See, first, think of any other contract, right? If you sign a contract with, say, a builder to build a house, the rules are set by that contract. You are both bound by that contract. If that builder brings in a third party, they're bound to the contract as well. They are subservient to the creation. See, the states kind of they've given up their purpose. See, first and foremost, it's the responsibility of the states to keep their creation, that is the federal government, in check. Not only have the states failed in this, and by perfect example, we see the 16th and 17th Amendments, where they've given the power to the federal government to ignore the wishes of the states. The states have also failed in their responsibility to protect our rights, which is the purpose of government in the first place. The Declaration of Independence says, to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Governments are instituted to protect our rights. The states were created to protect our rights. They created a federal government, a central government, and it is their job to make sure that it protects our rights as well. See, because of these failures, because the states have failed in their primary responsibility, we have a runaway federal government trampling on our rights and on the Constitution on a daily basis. I've seen studies that say 2/3 of what the federal government does is unconstitutional. And even worse, we have a federal judiciary that's drunk with power, since none of the entities created to oversee them will do their job. My wife will tell you I get so frustrated because I keep hearing judges issuing orders that they don't have the authority to do. We refer to the courts as rulings. Courts don't issue rulings. Courts issue opinions. And a court opinion does not create law. Where we are talking about a new Supreme Court justice, and everyone's worried about, Roe v. Wade is settled law. No, it's not. It was not passed by Congress. It was not signed by the president. Therefore, it's not law. It's a Supreme Court opinion. And it's just as flawed as other previous Supreme Court opinions. So, we have these people that we send to Congress to hold the judges in check, and they're not doing their job. Now, before you start pointing the fingers at those people, we need to recognize that the greatest failure of all is by the American people. You see, it is we who have not maintained our knowledge of the Constitution. We are the ones who have not taught our children to be free. We have not required that those we elect to represent us at all levels uphold their oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. See, it is we, the people, who routinely hire those we know are lying to us. voting in corrupt and dishonorable men and women as our representatives. If there's a failure in America, the fault lies squarely on the shoulders of the American people. Now, the good news is that if we created this mess, we can clean it up. That is what the Constitution study was created to do. To help we, the people, retake control of our governments, federal, state, and local. To teach ourselves and our children to be free. To help us recognize our freedoms and prepare to assert and defend them. As our first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court wrote, John Jay wrote, every member of the state ought diligently to read and to study the Constitution of his country and teach the rising generation to be free. By knowing their rights, they will sooner perceive when they are violated and be the better prepared to defend and assert them. We haven't studied our Constitution. We don't recognize that the federal government has limited enumerated powers. And that is the job of the states to hold them in check. We talk about check and balances between the branches of the federal government. What happened to the check of the states against the federal government? It's disappeared. And that is part of the reason why the federal government is out of control. The federal judiciary is out of control. And it's why in these hearings and debates about a new Supreme Court justice, you will hear probably nothing about an understanding of the Constitution. What you will hear, most likely, and I'm already hearing it in the news, are political points being made. Does he support this political point of view or that political point of view? Will this justice uphold the rulings that this political group likes or the ones that that political group likes? Never once will they ask, do you understand? What is your opinion of stare decisis versus what's actually written in the Constitution? What is your understanding of federal supremacy and the Supremacy Clause that applies to states? How about what is your understanding of the application of the Bill of Rights to the states? You probably won't hear those. And if you do, they'll be rare, and I doubt they'll much make the news. So I do hope that you found this interesting. I hope that, like me, you're getting frustrated at the state of our nation. And I hope you see that the first step to fixing this problem is going back to where the root of it is, and that is we the people, getting back to our understanding of the Constitution, the role of the federal government, the role of state governments, the role of local governments, and our role in making sure those governments are doing what they are created for, and that is to protect our rights. I hope you'll come back. I hope you will actually read the Constitution. Go back and look at the article. There's an article related to this. Read it. Check the links. Check the quotes. Let us find out what the Constitution actually says, and then let's start holding our representatives accountable, and let's start holding ourselves accountable. Let's stop depending on the government to teach our children what the Constitution says, because they have failed miserably at it. Let's read it. Let's teach it to the next generation. Let's continue to take control to return the Constitution back to we the people. I hope to hear you again the next time on the Constitution Study.